everything that we experience in our lives, we are co-creators in the experiencing of it. We're the co-creators and the co-witness. The co-creators because we are the elements and the aspects of God in form, creating the scenario and contributing to scenarios and adding to energy with others. We are the co-witnesses of it because we are also the witnessing aspect of God. God knows all things because God is all things through us and through everything. So that's why we think that way. Yeah, it was hard. I like when I started teaching people that you're responsible for the life you've created and experienced, you're responsible for. And it's hard for people to move that because immediately people want to associate the trauma that they've endured with the idea of victimhood. If I went through all these traumas, then I have an entitlement to be a victim. No, you don't. You have the experience and the gaining of these experiences. You've gained from that. That is all yours. You own that. You own the trauma. You own the suffering. You own what you have been through. But that doesn't mean that you are allowed to remain a victim outside of the direct experience, because in doing so, you have submitted to what has been done against you, or what has been how fear has infected your life, or trauma, all of that lower energy, you've submitted to it. And so to call yourself a victim, or to even relate to the victim mindset, aligns you with more victimization, aligns you with more experiences in that. And so you've got to shift the trajectory of your experience and not let it consume you and turn you into a dark personality, into a pained and miserable personality, because you feel so attached to that. Because in life, sometimes, and I will say this, some of us will use our suffering as a trophy. I've gone through this, that's my trophy. No, it's not. You own the rights to that experience because it's yours. You claim it, you own it, but to own it is to become master of it and wield the benefit and the gain and the value that it holds, because there's a reason it happened. Even if it was a miscreation, even if it was a unconscious manifestation of your state of mind, doesn't matter. You still own that experience. You still get to use it to your advantage and use it to benefit others as well in the process, because to gain from trauma and to give to others in love, again, it is the repeating experience of divine being. That's what it is. My partner and I on the walk today, we were having a conversation about gay men and how he was very upset and outraged because he had seen a post by someone who, this was like a teenage white girl who, these youngins. I think it started with the youngins who were completely raised from the internet, because I remember back when I had to wait for the dial tone and then I had to dial in and hope that I got through just to get into the internet, and everything took about a minute to load, and you wait to hear you got mail. Or for those people who couldn't afford AOL because they couldn't pay for the service, they had the free mail, which was Yahoo, before Google existed, because the Yahoo was the way to go. And then of course we had Internet Explorer back in school on the computers. So the internet was another resource, like the library. The internet was another resource for us. It wasn't a lifestyle. And so I think in the late 2000s, early teens, I think that's when we hit the internet being a lifestyle, where you have entire, youngins who are completely, their entire life has been based around the concept of social media and the internet being a norm. And it is not a norm. It's only been an experience for, a small fraction of the population for the last 10, 15 years. Most of us older folk, we don't have to spend every minute on the internet. I still have people who, when I'm walking on the trails, they stop and they ask for directions, and they've got their cell phone in their hand. And I'm just like, use your map, use your map app. But they've got it written down on a piece of paper. It's because it's still the mindset that I don't have to use my phone for everything, or it has the ability to do this for me or do that for me. So you have these youngins who don't understand the struggle that some of us who didn't have the luxury of the internet when we were younger had. Because, I mean, I honestly didn't start having the ability to have access to the internet until I was around like 12 or 13. And for most people, because that's when it started to become mainstream and everybody was buying a Hewlett Packard computer or a compact computer with a big old boxy screen, and the speakers are attached to the side, if you could afford the speakers. So back then, we gay folk, especially gay men, we didn't have a community other than going to a bar or club, which is where the gay scene was at. It wasn't just about clubbing and, having anonymous sex. People went there because they just wanted to be in their community. I went to a gay bar many a times, or club many a times, not because I wanted to go and have sex in the bathrooms or anything like that, because that's the illusion of the gay scene, but I wanted to just be around people that I could relate to, people that I was going to feel safe around. And it was just something different, right? It was something new. And in my side of town, which is the east side of Houston, where it was predominantly Hispanic at that time, old Catholic Hispanic neighborhoods, Second Ward, Magnolia, all of that, Lawndale, all of that, there wasn't a way for me to connect to anybody like myself. And if there was someone like me, they were scared and they didn't talk about it. And so that, I had to endure my own fair share of trauma as a gay man. To this day, I go to a bathroom, I still have anxiety and stress by going into a public men's bathroom because of the trauma I endured as a child with all of the incessant bullying and teasing and being beat up and all that. So you have that for the rest of your life until at some point, it drops off. But they don't understand the trauma and all of the experiences we had to endure. And so my partner was talking about how this little white girl who's like a teenager was like going off and saying that gay white men think that they are the epitome of the gay community and they represent everybody in the gay community and they've been given more attention and more focus, etc. And so she was going off about that and how comparing gay white men to Nazis, right? And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like this little foolish little girl. So my partner was upset because she's like, she doesn't have the right to monopolize the suffering that we've endured in the LGBTQ community. And, she said, and he's like, it's not right. You don't have the right to come up and say from your privilege, your position of privilege, stop using your suffering or your trauma as a trophy. Stop using it and there's a difference between using your experience to propel change and to cause transformation and owning it because it is what you went through and it gave you a sense of empowerment. That's one thing. And I think this applies to a lot of different people. This applies to Black people in America because no one gets to take that suffering away from them. No one gets to take that collective, conscious, cultural trauma away from them. That is owned by the people in this country because of what their ancestors had to endure. And that has carried over and over, and it carries in the genes and in the blood and all that. Same thing with gay males as well. Same thing with people of a different nationality, etc. So it goes across the board, and it is across the board. And so this little white girl who is entitled doesn't have the right to take away the gain because they don't understand the perspective or because they don't have to live in a world where that's an issue or that's a norm for them, and that's because of what was built on the backs of people like myself and the gay community that came before me, who busted their ass and had to deal with rioting and stuff to bring things about. So, these younger, it's the same thing. When you think of Black folks, these young black kids who their parents busted their asses either getting themselves through high school, getting themselves through college when they got no financial assistance. They didn't have the luxury of having parents who had money to just put them to school. There were a lot of Black folks in this country who did not have that right or ability because of the cultural norms and because of the perpetuation of racism. And so no one has the right to go up and say, you need to stop using what your ancestors did. Y'all are not slaves. That's the same bullshit, right? And so that's the problem, is that these younger people do not have respect for the wisdom and the suffering that was endured and gained by the people that came before them that brought about positive change. It's one thing to be a victim and do nothing with that suffering and have done nothing to change this world from that. It's another thing when you have endured, the value of what you've gone through, you can own that, and you have used it to shift and transform the culture or the norms or the opportunity for less suffering for those after you, which is what has happened now. You have guys, straight guys, who can go and wear fingernail polish. My ass would have been busted up in high school if I wore fingernail polish to school. So that wasn't something I had the luxury of experiencing when I was young. So there's something to be said about the people who struggled and really did a lot of work to build the rest of us up. And so we have to give people their due. People paid their dues. They earned it. They earned it. And so this guy, when Neil was talking to God about, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been doing this for 20 years. You know, that little girl on the internet could say, I've been doing this for 2 years. All my life I'm like, girl, you are like 2 cents to the dollar. Like, you're like fresh out of the paper mill. What are you talking about? You know, and that's the way that's about. Like, no, if you really have put in the work and the effort, then your life would exemplify it. It would show it. It would be present in obvious ways. And you would have failures that you could say, I did this and I failed miserably at it, but I did this and it worked for me.